Jim, one of the themes I know you've been pursuing is the democratization of business services in general and payments in particular. That's one of the things Money on Mobile is doing, but talk to me about what you see Money on Mobile doing in terms of democratization of the payment system.
So I'd kind of like to unpack the word democratization of payments because it's a fancy sounding word, but or phrase, I suppose. But really, the problem is that poor people don't have access to the same tools that rich people do. So you and I have bank accounts, okay, which means we can do wonderful things. And if you don't have a bank account, it's very difficult. So opening up these systems is really one of the focuses that I concentrate on. And so I think what Money on Mobile is doing is super important because in India, the unbanked population is tremendous. It is of a scale that I don't think any Westerner can truly appreciate. And so there's just the potential to do a tremendous amount of social good. And it's a very challenging thing because you're talking about people who have tiny amounts of money. But if we can move those amounts efficiently and allow them to save and spend and invest and just do the things that we take for granted, then all of society improves.
So I just returned from a couple of weeks in India, Jim, and what I'm seeing now is the emergence of what I call an underbanked population. And I define that as someone who used to have no banking facilities at all. Now they might have a bank account because they're receiving a government subsidy through it, for example, and it's required to have a bank account. But in fact, there's no bank anywhere near them, no physical bank, no ATM. So we're starting to see that democratization apply to that very rapidly growing population in India now that's underbanked. They just don't have access to those services. I think that's tremendously exciting as we move out into the far reaches of India.
Yeah, and it turns out that that's actually a worldwide phenomenon. The underbanked is a large segment of just the world population. And one of the great things about it is that they're not underphoned.
Right.
Okay. So that there is not a population of people on the planet pretty much that doesn't have access to feature phone cellular technology, and in some cases smartphones. And with that technology, we can give them a lot of the basic services that a bank would do. We can give them value exchange. We can give them a way to transfer money. We can give them access to basically most of the things that you would have 20 years ago into a bank to get. You can do it on a feature phone.
About 90% of the services that population needs can all be done on a feature phone. And so it's really unpacking banking down into its simple components of money transfer and bill payment and storage of funds that Money on Mobile can deliver down at very low expense at the margin. That's really the key to the model.
90% of the features that I need can be delivered on a feature phone.
Absolutely
I haven't been in a bank in months.
Right.
Except to maybe get something notarized, which I think is archaic anyway.
Right.
But yeah, it's really possible to give most of the things you need to do, what we consider basic commerce to anyone now. And the trick to do that is, of course, when you're building any sort of system that touches money, is you have to manage it because governments get involved, and there's potential fraud and potential people can steal. They can steal electronically now, and so you have to do those things right. But yeah, you don't really need those fancy bricks.
Just don't need the bricks and mortar anymore. And in India, that bricks and mortar will never make it out of the major population centers because there's just not the volume of traffic. What Money on Mobile is doing is uncovering traffic, very low dollar value per transaction, but a lot of transactions. And I think it's surprising to people the numbers that we're seeing coming out of rural areas where people are primarily in agriculture. They still have the same financial transactional needs as everybody else. They don't really justify a brick and mortar institution, particularly when it's closed or it runs out of electricity or other issues. They want something that's 24/7, readily accessible, and essentially frictionless. And that's where the 21st century is meeting, in effect, the 19th century at the frontier in India. It's a very exciting place to be.
Yeah, and if you look at the history of banking, rural populations need it more. It turns out that an urban population pretty much has a steady income, whereas a rural population, they may go through a very long period of no money and then a big spike when the crop comes in of a lot of money. And the bank smooths that out.
Right.
But if you don't have that, then you're in a terrible problem.
Right, and so a lot of people have rolled out informal lending networks, which are very high cost.
They are.
So if you can digitize that kind of thing, lower the cost down, it makes everything more efficient, more effective, and safer.
Yes, much better.